Hello everybody, I'm back to go over customizing Beyond Chaos content like I said I was going to do in the setup tutorial video a couple weeks ago. Just to go over some things before we start. This tutorial will assume that you're familiar with the randomizer, at least to some degree, like you've created a couple seeds, maybe you've even beaten one, you understand how flags generally work, you understand sort of how the randomizer does things. It doesn't need to be to any serious degree. I'm not going to test you on this, and I don't require you to have a rather profound knowledge, but it does sort of expect that you know the basics of what a randomizer does. I would also like to go over some good practices before we begin, and I will elaborate on them when we get to the relevant sections. But one thing you may wish to do if you're not super confident with editing things is to start small. Only make a couple of changes at a time. Make sure that those couple of changes work correctly. And also save frequently and keep it backup. It's pretty easy to re-download a fresh copy of Beyond Chaos, but if you make some edits and then everything works fine, and then you decide to make further edits, you may wish to keep a backup of that intermediate step, because otherwise you may lose that, and we don't have that intermediate step. That is yours. So make a backup, save frequently, doing things in small steps until you know what you're doing. And this will make troubleshooting generally easier. If you add 10 sprites at once, that's not very difficult to go through. If you add 200 sprites at once, it will be a pain to troubleshoot. So, if there is an error. So that's fine. Let's go into it. I have a somewhat fresh version of Beyond Chaos. In the first folder here, we have the normal GUI version. In the second folder, we have the source code with all the Python, the raw Python and stuff. We will go through that later. I suspect the majority of people will be just fine editing the stuff here, so we'll start here, and if you don't have any interest in mangling the source code, then you don't have to worry about that portion of the tutorial. So the first things first, probably the most common thing to edit is sprite replacements.txt. There's some stuff to go over here. This is an example file of sprite replacements.txt. So we're going to take a look at we're going to take a look at this line here as an example, line 16. So there are a number of things that you can do with the sprite randomizer. And first of all, you'll want to behave and follow the format provided. One thing about the sprites is that if you look, sometimes there are just random commas out here. Sometimes there are even two of them. These are all necessary, so it's a lesson to just in general, this thing that you have downloaded works. If something is there, assume it is there for a reason, and don't delete things unless you're sure you can do that and get away with it. Excuse me, my cat wants in. What are you doing? So with that in mind, consider this first line. There are 7 commas in this line, and that divides this into 8 different sections. You don't always need 8 sections for... I think my other cat wants in. Never mind. There are 8 sections for each sprite, and they are as follows. You don't need all of them, but you do need most of them, and you do need them in the right order. The first one is the .bin file. Every sprite has an associated sprite file, and you can see this if you go into sprites. For example, here's arcanemage.bin. That is pointing to this file here, arcademage.bin. It's basically saying, yes, there's a sprite with this name. We want that sprite in the randomizer. The second one is the name of the sprite. This isn't super important. It just, like, this won't show up in game anywhere. This is for the text file, because the text file, I don't know if I have a good example here, but the text file will note several things, such as music, for instance, and I don't know if this actually uses a custom sprite file. I don't think it does, but somewhere around here it'll display, hey, here's what all your sprites are. I don't think I have that in this scene, so don't worry about it. The third one is the gender of the sprite. Male means it will replace male or neutral characters. Neutral means it will replace any character, and female means it will replace neutral and male characters, or neutral and female characters. This doesn't matter if you're playing with party. It will completely ignore this requirement. You still need the parameter in here. It's still looking for it, but it just won't care about it. This concerns riding sprites. Not all sprites have riding sprites. In vanilla, you may even be aware of a bug where if you go to a Chocobo stable with Bannon in the lead, you will see that he does not have riding sprites. In general, as you can see by Notepad++ lighting up like a Christmas tree, the sprites we make have riding sprites. So if you've made your own sprite, you will have to consider if you've made riding sprites for it or not, but if you're finding it from somewhere else, you could probably assume that it does have riding sprites. And if it doesn't, oops, oh well. This number here is a fallback portrait ID. Most sprites have portraits, which is this parameter here, but if they don't, or if for some reason somebody mangles their sprite replacements.txt file and accidentally deletes a sprite folder or a sprite file, like a portrait file or something, you will have this little number here, and it basically says, hey, if there's no portrait here, just use one of the vanilla ones. And this vanilla one is basically, you just define it to be like something reasonably close. Arcade uses portrait number 18, which I believe is the ghosts. Then below it, Archer F uses 0, which is Terra's. Archer M uses 1, which is Locke's, and so on. I don't have a full list of those here, but you can ask about it in the Discord if you're curious. I will also be providing a link to the Discord in this video. Then after that is the portrait file. This, again, similar to the first parameter, will point towards the portrait file if there is one. You can see that here, arcademage-p.bin. That's what all the -p files are. The -p.bin files are the portrait files, and the -b.pal files are the palettes for the portrait. They tell the game which colors to use for the portrait. Over here is the sort of character category for the sprite. Some subsprites share character categories. Like you can see down here, there's a Black Mage sprite here, and there's another one here, and another one here. This is because we have a whole bunch of different Black Mage sprites, and to kind of bias against selecting them, or rather outright preventing it, selecting multiple of them, we have these character tags in here just so that you won't get several Black Mages in the same seed. Or if you're playing with the Clone Party tag, which is, or the Clone Party flag, which is not super popular, but it exists, it will bias towards it, so you will get several Black Mage sprites if you get a Black Mage sprite. So those are there just to kind of split things up and make it so you don't get a bunch of the same sprite. Finally, the last category here is the character type category or whatever. Arcane Mage belongs to generic because this is not like a named character or anything. It's just like a random, like nameless character. Some don't have any tags, like this arc file doesn't have any tags, and some have multiple. This Antlion belongs to both the pets and the potato character categories. So you can have multiple, and in fact, you can even have more than two. There is this sprite here that has three character tags, part of the Cyan, Tenzin, and Samurai character types. So that's what this is. This is the thing that you see when you go into the randomizer. When you actually choose your flags, you'll see like love, like, hate, only, no, and one of them will be generic. So you can bias towards or away from generic sprites, and that's fine. This is stuff I covered in the tutorial video for setting it up. If you want to change this or that, you'll notice that these things are separated by commas. They're delimiters, which are ways to kind of split up data into multiple different things. If you want to make another tag, you can't do this because, like, say I want to make it a custom set, you can't do this because it will take that as another parameter that doesn't exist. Within categories, our delimiter, we use the vertical bar, which is on my keyboard. It's shift and the button right above shift. It's this little vertical thing. And this allows you to put something as part of multiple different tags if you want. So now if I go into the randomizer, it will not only will it generate this new custom category, because this would be a new flag. You could make this anything you want. You could make this a grapes tag, and then the randomizer will create a grapes tag for all your sprites that you've labeled as grapes. You can name this anything, and it will fill that out. So if you want like an FF set, like a Final Fantasy set, you could make that there. And then if you want like a Goofy set, you could call it Goofy set or whatever. You could even put something in both of the sets if you wanted to. So that's how you create multiple sets and multiple different categories, some of which may be entirely created by you. You can do that. I think that covers it for the sprite replacements. So we'll go back into the folder. The other thing that is pretty heavy duty that I'd like to get out of the way is the opera. The opera is also pretty complicated. If you're not sure how this works, you may be better off asking. I'll try to cover the lion's share of it, but there is still some stuff that needs some extra background. You can have singers here. They're listed on the left. I'll pick this one, Cyan, line 18 here. Each character has several parameters to this as well. They're listed at the top of the file. You can't really see it too well, so let me just minimize this and put it like so. So the format goes, you can use their name here. This is what they will be called in-game. Then the first parameter is their title. So some are named like Sir Draco, Sir Cyan. Some don't have a title. Atma does not have a title. It's this space here. Some of them are something different, like general. You can give them whatever title you want, whatever makes sense. These ones are all done by, these delimiters are all done by bars, so make sure to be using those. The second one is the character sprite, which will be referencing, oops, I don't think it's this one. Oops, there it goes. There's a, okay, yeah, there probably is. It probably references this. I'm pretty sure it references this one for its sprite. There's an OG Cyan sprite, and it's all the way down in the O section. Vanilla sprites in particular may not be in this, but they are somewhere. There is an OG Cyan sprite for the randomizer to reference. There's the gender for the sprite. Some are set to random if it doesn't matter. Like, this is basically neutral in the other section. Like, it doesn't really matter what gender your ghost is. Like, who cares? Then there's a default song file. There's a sample type. We have legacy samples, and these use legacy samples currently. So That's just how it is. Then there's the legacy sound. I believe, or legacy sample here. So this is the actual instrument that it's pointing to. I believe this 34 is the theme that is the sample that carries the melody in Cyan's theme. It's the, I don't know what it's called, but it's like a high pitched woodwind as opposed to Maria's 3A, which is like the standard singing voice. Then there are octaves. Um, you'll have to kind of know what the how the instrument sounds to be able to do this. This is for each note, I think, offhand. Then there's a volume. 127 is the loudest volume. 0 is the quietest. You can see that most of these are around 100, but some of them are slightly different. There's a 72 in here. I guess the ghost is very loud, so we need to shut him up a little. Then these are, I don't remember my MML too much, but these are things like attack values, how fast the note ramps up, and stuff like that. I don't remember what M is, unfortunately. I should have looked that up beforehand, but these are another thing that you'll have to be somewhat familiar with MML to take care of. We can answer questions like that on the Discord. Anyways, that's all the fancy stuff. Down here is the easier stuff. You can make factions. You can just you could make something new. I don't know, if I wanted to make a new thing, I could do Coca-Cola, vertical bar, space, and then Pepsi. Just follow the format. A lot of these things, it's all about just following the format. And then we need like a colon here for technical reasons, as it says up here. Just put a colon in there. A lot of this is going to be just duplicate the structure that's already there for head, but I will be pointing out a couple things of importance. So that's fine. We'll leave that for now. There are a couple other things in here. Most of them are a lot easier. I'll go through them one by one. First, opera. You probably don't need to mess with this stuff. This is pretty technical stuff. There are some sprite sheets, I believe these are, in here, but you probably don't need to mess with those. Sprites, this is your actual sprites folder that sprites.txt references. If you incorporate new sprites, you will have to include them in this folder, so this is a folder that you may have interest in. Choral names. Choral names is very easy. This is just the stuff that you pick up in Ebbets Rock when you're going to fight Haydn. If you want to add something new, just or remove something, just add a new line, put something else in there. It's fine. There's nothing to that one. Let me get rid of some of these files just so that I'm not crowding up everything. All right, dance names. These are the names that are randomly generated if you randomize dance. What's important to note here is that there are 9 sections that are separated by, for example, on line 49, 5 asterisks. And these 9 sections denote the different pieces of the dance names. This first one is like all the suffixes. So you'll see you have song, nocturne, aria, sonata, blues, rondo, requiem, and jazz. Those correspond to the vanilla dances. Wind song, forest nocturne, desert aria, and so on. This is going to be the biggest one because it's shared between the other 8 dance types. But below that you have the plains dance, all the prefixes that you can have: wind, plains, grass, airy, sky, meadow, and so on. Then the forest dance prefixes, the desert prefixes, the town prefixes, the mountain prefixes, the water ones, the cave ones, and the snow ones. You will have those 9 sections. Make sure to preserve those 9 sections. If you lose a section, it won't like it because it won't be able to figure out, like if I remove this line here, then it will think all of this is for the cave section, and then when it goes to populate the snow section, it'll be like, what do I have? Nothing here. So make sure to preserve the 9 different sections. Besides that, it's just make a new line and add something in. You will perhaps run into character limits, so be careful about that. I think dance names offhand have a maximum of 12 letters. So if you put something very long in here, it may be limited to some of the shorter prefixes, nocturne is a pretty long thing, or flamenco is a pretty long word, and it's only going to get paired with things like sky. You can't have a pastoral flamenco, there just isn't space for that. And in fact, you're not going to have a pastoral much of anything because pastoral is also long. So keep the character limits in mind for that, though there are enough letters that it's probably not going to be a big deal. Female names. This is the bank of names that it pulls from for female characters. There's another one for male characters shortly below. You can edit these. It's just one name per line. There's a maximum of 6 characters, and it probably won't like any arbitrary character. Like if I try to add, say, this letter, the E with the accent on it that you see in French a lot, no such character exists in the game, so don't do that. It won't like it. But it will pull from this for all of the female characters, and it won't really care all that much if you have party on, because that sort of just like completely takes gender requirements, throws them out the window. Male names, very much the same thing. Moogle names, also very much the same thing, but this only applies to the Moogles at the beginning. It'll pick one of these names. You can change those if you want, one per line, as per usual. It's fine. Moves. This one is for the special attacks that are generated. Special attacks, I believe, also have a limit of 12 letters. So something like acrobatics, which is, you can't really see it that well. There's acrobatics up here. And that doesn't get paired with much because it's already 10 letters long. So if you want things like ball atomic, that works because it's short enough. So keep them reasonably short and they will be able to pair with more things. Again, it's just one per line. There are a ton of them because you kind of need a lot for special moves. There are a whole bunch of special moves in the game, and sometimes they pull multiple of these at once. So you probably want to keep a whole bunch of these, otherwise maybe it'll be a little bit homogenous. So yeah, have fun with that one. Opera, we've already gone through. Won't do it again. It already took long enough. Passwords. These are the passwords for when you're in South Figaro and you have to do that like espionage mission with Locke during his scenario. This is divided into 3 sections. The top section is the first failing password. The second section is the successful password, and the third section is the second failing one. And they're separated by a bunch of these lines. Keep these lines in here. They're for splitting them up into different sections. They're also kind of themed. This one is like pop culture references and just silly things. These ones are like actual kind of passwordy things, and these are like bad things to sort of match the themes of the original one. You don't have to follow these themes at all if you don't want to or do not care to, but they're there if you want to kind of preserve the thematic sense of how this originally was set up. But I mean, it's not that big of a deal. You can just one per line, just throw them into whatever section you want. It's fine. The game will always have the second option as the one that is correct at the end, so this is just a flavor thing in the end. Poems. These are the poems that Cyan recites at the top of Mount Zozo in the World of Ruin before you re-recruit him, or whoever happens to be there if you randomize character locations. These can be kind of tricky because they're a little bit difficult to troubleshoot, and you have to be careful. They're split up by 3 lines, 3 dashes here. There's a title and author. They're commented out with an octothorpe here, a pound sign, a hashtag, whatever you call it. There's a little thing for poems that you can't fit into one text boxes. You need to manually break them into boxes with blank lines. if you exceed the text box limit, bad things will happen. So just like don't do that. Split them up. Like this one's a good example. These this is pretty much a full text box. This is about the maximum you could fit in a text box, so you could use this one as sort of a template. And then it does the same thing over here where it nearly fills up the text box. Some are much smaller, and you can see that it's totally fine to do that. There's a whole bunch of these. You can go over them, use the ones that exist as a template, and then afterwards make sure to follow the formatting. Like there's a blank line here. So if I wanted to add another one after this, keep the blank line, put some dashes in here, and then add the new one below. But yeah, make sure that you don't exceed the character limit for the text box. And I don't know what that character limit is offhand. Um, it's obviously a lot longer than any average name or something, but it's going to be shorter than you might be comfortable with because, hey, SNES limitations. Songs.txt. This one's another somewhat complicated one. There's a format for this section which is helpfully included within the text file. So there's the file name here, for instance. BL_rebels is one such file name. This will reference the .mml file that's somewhere in here. I'm not sure where it is offhand in this directory, but it's fine. So this is the file name for the song itself. Then after that is a list of songs it replaces. So this song can replace the fanfare when you win a battle. It can replace Locke's theme. It can replace the Figaro Castle theme. It can replace the Returner's Hideout theme. And I think that also corresponds to the basement of Figaro Castle before you fight the tentacles. And it can replace the theme that plays when you go to Save Them as the theme where it's Kefka and Narshe and you're defending the Esper with the three parties. And then there's all the soldiers running around and stuff. You will need to know what songs are called what to be able to use this, but every song appears once in here. So you can also use the jukebox that's in game to look at what these songs are called. I believe it uses the exact same notation. So if you load up a seed and check, you can scroll through and find them. The text file, I believe, also uses this notation as well. So you can see that Phoenix is indeed just referenced as Phoenix. And then you've got the file name here. All this stuff here is just information in the MML itself. You don't need to worry about that. That's fine. It's not even part of what we're doing, so don't worry about that. Anyways, if you put a star in here, you can make it more likely to show up somewhere. For example, Blord Ruins is likely to show up in the Ancient song slot and the Magitech song slot more frequently. So you can do that to, if you want to bias some songs to certain locations, you do have that option. Then INE is for battle music only. If you want something to be able to show up as battle music, you can do that. It's a two-dimensional scale to, and I mean two-dimensional as in there's two different variables, not that it's like paper thin or shallow or anything like that. It's a two-dimensional scale that allows you to kind of rank songs in terms of how epic they are, kind of. There's a whole note here about kind of what it's supposed to be, and you can see that the Breath of Fire 2 battle theme uses this. It's a reasonably intense song with absolutely no grandeur, so you can follow that template for that stuff. Then here there are a couple custom modes in Beyond Chaos for Halloween and Christmas. If you generate a seed around those times, one is on Halloween specifically, which is in a week-ish from the time I'm recording this. And then there's winter, which is either on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. You can specially include things in certain places that you wouldn't before. So this one is done with an H : and then the song name, and then or a W. There's a W around here somewhere, probably for one of the Ice songs. It doesn't matter. It's the same format, and that will only show up there. And there's also H2 and W2, which if something is already there, you can make it more likely in Christmas or Halloween. I'm sure there's examples here. It's fine. It's not that difficult. Then, yeah, then there's just all the songs here. You've got them all named on the left. You've got all the songs they can replace on the right. And then here's one. So this song from Tales of Fantasia can normally show up uh, in a seed, but it is more likely to show up in a winter seed. And these two songs here, a lot of the snow songs are like quadrupled, for instance. A lot of the spooky songs are doubled or quadrupled or whatever. You can make it whatever number you want, but the point is you can make songs more likely to show up in holiday modes. And that's all there is to that. There's some tier boss stuff down here as well. Um, so there are songs that can show up in the final battle. It's a little bit complicated. Then I'm not sure what this is, to be honest. But oh, I see. Some of them are. This is just referring to the randomization in the first place. So some songs are guaranteed to not be replaced, and a lot of them are the ones that are there for technical reasons or for just certain reasons. Like there's the silence song. When silence is played, silence will always be played. This will never be randomized. Same with a lot of the more ambient themes, like when the water is playing, when you're at like Barren Falls or something. There's more sound effects stuff when you're like when the wind is blowing or when the waves are going. Some of the opera things are not randomized because they require specific timings, but I'm sort of going off on a tangent here. Most of these songs are guaranteed to be randomized. All of these things with hundreds next to them are guaranteed to be randomized. You see that happen all the time in the seeds with the music randomized. You can, if you wish, pick a different number for this. You can, if you want to randomize silence, then you could put a number here and it will potentially randomize silence, and that'll be really goofy, but you could do it. If you really like a song too, like say you're a big fan of Shadow's theme, you could maybe reduce this down to 50, and then half the time it won't randomize at all and it'll stay Shadow's theme. The default is that it just randomizes everything that it can and leaves alone the things that you probably shouldn't, but that's up to you. That's fine for songs.txt. Finally, there's sprite replacements.txt, which we've gone over to death already, so I won't go over that. So that concludes the normal custom stuff, normal custom content. Before we conclude, this is the main bulk of the video, which is good because it's half an hour at this point. That's fine. Before we conclude, I'd like to quickly just go over the source code. The source code can be randomized or it can be edited, and you can do that by going to the website that you downloaded this from, and instead of downloading the executable, download the source code instead. I will warn you that it is somewhat opaque. It's for a number of different reasons. One is that dealing with hexadecimal and like assembly for SNES, in Python is a little bit weird, and so you get a lot of weird things going on there. The second is that this has been developed by a few different people over time, and things have kind of stacked up on each other to the point of being a little bit more obfuscated than it probably could. But there are some things that you can pretty easily mess with. This is probably not the one I really want to show off, but you can look at any of these with Python. But you will want to be familiar with how hexadecimal and ASM works for Final Fantasy VI, you want to be familiar with Python, with how Python works, obviously, and you will also finally want to be familiar with how the randomizer actually does things in the first place, because some things are sort of dependent on how the game actually works, and there are limitations and whatnot. So there are a lot of skills that are required to do this effectively. So I would not recommend this unless you're a power user, but you can edit some things. For instance, this line here is pretty easy enough to approach, even if you're not very familiar with programming. And this shows all the commands that are never replaced in a seed. So you will always have fight in a seed, for instance. Some of these are for technical reasons. Jump seems like a command that should be replaceable, but I'm pretty sure if you replace jump, then using Palador will cause problems because jump is replaced. I believe if lore is replaced, then learning a lore does bad things. So some of these are here for technical reasons, some of these are here for flavor reasons. You could theoretically change this really easily just by, say, deleting that, and then Magitech can be replaced, for instance. So that's the sort of thing that you can do with this, even without too much knowledge of what's going on. A lot of this you probably don't want to mess with, though, and a lot of this is doing raw hex stuff, so that's kind of opaque to someone who's not super familiar with. So if you're not a power user, be careful about how you change the stuff here, but you can go through all of the things and look at everything specifically. This is the item randomizer specifically. This governs how items are randomized and how they interact with randomize and give them special properties, changing their stats and whatnot. And you can change this if you like. These are prices. You can like mess with prices. I believe 250 is the Super Ball, so we have special price limits for that one. So it'll never be super cheap for the Super Ball. This is the kind of stuff that you can change if you want. This is for Mad World specifically. So if you can process all this, you can edit this, you can go through the Python files. I suspect if you are watching this video, though, that you, no offense, are perhaps not the power user that would be able to do this super easily, but I don't mean to discourage you. So, like, maybe you wanted to learn Python and this is an interesting way to do it. I don't know. Um, Everybody has a different circumstance. I'm not about to judge you for that, but that is sort of how the Python, how the source code can be viewed and messed with and potentially changed to your liking. But be careful about it. Anyways, that concludes the tutorial for all of this. Hopefully, it's not a little bit too long because I'm not surprised that it has gone this long, but I was hoping it wouldn't. If you have any questions, though, leave them in the comments below, and maybe I'll actually do some research before answering them, and then you'll have an actual answer instead of me just winging it. That aside, I will also leave a link to the Discord, so if you want to ask questions there, you can do so as well, and then there will be more people there in case there's a question that I do not know the answer to. It does happen. But otherwise, that's all good, so hopefully that covers everything, and happy randomizing and happy editing.